We are jumping straight into a deep dive today, and it's centered on an event that was, well, honestly pretty startling in its scale.
It really was. We're talking about a government-funded public spectacle.
Right, in a major French city.
Yeah.
And you had over 1 million people watching this thing unfold. Families, children, all out in the streets.
And the central feature of this massive display, it was these two colossal mechanical figures.
Yeah.
The source material we've looked at, it flags them immediately. One is a towering mechanical figure it calls the demon Lilith.
And the
A
others.
massive mechanical demon Minotaur. And it's the sheer size and the context public, funded by the state, that makes our sources argue this is so significant.
Precisely. And so our mission today is to really analyze the source material's extraordinary claim, which is that this display, it's not just some avant-garde performance art.
They're saying something else entirely.
They're saying it's a carefully constructed, very visible demonstration just loaded with specific satanic and occult symbolism.
And we've synthesized the author's argument here by focusing on their interpretation of all this visual language.
Yeah.
We're reporting on the specific, theological and mythological connections they draw.
So they're asserting the figures and the staging are deliberate spiritual symbolism.
That's the claim.
Okay, let's unpack this. The source suggests this is one of the darkest public displays they have ever seen. And again, this wasn't some fringe act on a street corner.
Not at all.
Our research confirms the immense scale, the emphasis on public visibility. The authors seem profoundly alarmed that this display was government funded.
And that element of participation that's crucial to their critique. They highlight the whole thing, the staging, the trailer. It felt less like entertainment and more like a ritual.
The event opened with a cinematic trailer, right?
It did. And the mechanical figure, Lilith, she actually speaks in the first person.
And our source interprets that as feeling almost like an invocation.
Or a ritual, yeah.
Yeah.
A spiritual intention being laid out right from the start.
Okay, so let's focus on the initial visuals, the framework the source breaks down. They argue the stage, the graphics. They contain obvious displays of occult symbolism.
And the first image they zero in on is this two-ringed gate symbol.
Right. So tell us what the commentary suggests about that graphic.
Well, the symbol is described as two circles, and they're joined by a sort of cross-like horizontal bar.
Okay.
In the material's interpretation, these circles, they represent portals or gateways.
A veil between two worlds.
Exactly. Specifically, a passage or an entrance for spiritual entities. And they argue this lines up directly with Lilith's monologue in the trailer.
Where she says she wanders from city to city in search of damned souls.
Right. So the visual is meant to signify passage between realms.
And what about that horizontal bar connecting the circles? How did the authors see that?
They immediately interpret it as a broken cross.
A broken cross, so a deliberate mockery.
That's how they see it. A mockery of Christian symbols, specifically the crucifixion. It's seen as a clear symbol of opposition.
And there was more to that silhouette, wasn't there?
Yes. If you look at the larger framing, the source claims the upper structure forms a subtle demonic silhouette.
Like horns or something.
Exactly, like horns or claws, kind of foreshadowing the monstrous figures that are about to appear.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The analysis moves from the graphics to the physical stage structure itself.
Which they argue forms an even more potent symbol.
The staging has, 2 upper arms, 2 lower spreading legs, and a central point. And they claim this whole composition is signaling pentagram imagery.
Specifically the inverted kind. And they're clear, they say it's not a perfect geometric pentagram, but they argue when you look at the silhouette.
Especially with the dramatic lighting and the fire.
Exactly. The visual effect is undeniably that of the 5-point inverted star, and the author spent a lot of time explaining the difference between the two forms.
So how does the occult interpretation of the inverted pentagram contrast with the upright one? Because this is a massive distinction in the material.
It's the difference between alignment and rebellion, really. The upright pentagram, according to their commentary, is often associated with, the balance of nature, the spirit aligned with the elements. Divine order.
And the inverted one.
Is the exact opposite. It signifies inversion, the reversal of that divine order. The triumph of matter over spirit. Rebellion. They claim this geometry is a staple in various satanic rites.
And the composition doesn't just stop at an inverted star. The source connects this geometry to one of the most infamous figures in occult tradition, Baphomet.
Absolutely. They specifically point out the goat-like elements and the horn shapes you can see at the top of the structure.
So even without a literal goat's head, they're saying the cues are there.
They are. The commentary links this imagery directly to Baphomet, which the authors define as basically, well, as Satan. They argue the illusion is unmistakable to anyone who knows occult symbology.
Now, if we move from the big structure to the smaller details, like on the vehicles, the source talks about a triple serpent or the triple spiral symbol.
And the visual details here are fascinating, according to them. The authors claim that within this spiral design, they could see a very clearly visible 666.
The number of the beast.
Right. And beyond just the number, the serpent imagery itself is a direct link to Satan, to ancient pagan serpent worship, and in a biblical context,
the Garden of Eden.
Immediately, temptation, hidden knowledge, a false awakening. The source sees the whole underlying message as deception, the lie that, you can be your own god.
And the source mentions something called a tree skeleton. That's a very specific term.
It is. It's a motif with 3 interlocking spirals. The source interprets the structure here as representing feminine triads, connected to dark lunar mysteries, and serving as ritual portals.
So references to witchcraft, pagan traditions.
Yes, intensifying that sense of ritualistic defiance.
And finally, that one pervasive element, fire. It's everywhere in the imagery.
The fire is seen as an intensifier. In the occult framework, the source is analyzing. Fire means purification, or destruction, or transformation.
So when you combine it with symbols of rebellion,
the message, according to the authors, is one of radical, destructive transformation away from divine order.
Okay, let's pivot to the centerpieces of the whole spectacle, the figures themselves. The source sees this combination of human and animal or demon elements as a symbol of corrupted creation.
And Lilith, specifically, is called the centerpiece of the entire narrative being presented.
So when analyzing Lilith, the authors are clear they're not pulling from the main biblical canon.
Right, correct. They're referencing the version of her story from occult traditions, Jewish folklore. In this tradition, she's Adam's rebellious first wife.
The one who refused submission left Eden.
And became a demoness. A night hag who, seduces man and harms children.
That makes her a profoundly potent spiritual symbol in this source's view.
Oh, absolutely. The source sees her as representing the darker side of feminine power, witchcraft, and chaos. For them, Lilith is symbolically the enemy's version of the creation story.
A counterfeit narrative.
Exactly. She embodies the ultimate rejection of divine authority.
And then you have the Minotaur, the half-man, half-bull. The source doesn't just see Greek mythology here.
No, they see ancient false gods. The Minotaur from the myth is a hybrid born from an unnatural union, trapped, needing human sacrifices.
But the source immediately connects that bull-headed figure to gods like Baal or Moloch.
Yes, deities that are deeply associated in biblical accounts with idolatry and child sacrifice.
So if you're looking at this through that theological lens, a bull-headed creature in a public event, it instantly signals spiritual rebellion.
Precisely. It's an ancient symbol of human defection from God. The authors argue the imagery is chosen for a spiritual charge, not just for looks.
This brings us to the core claim of the commentary, that this modern display of hybrid creatures is not just mythology, it is extremely biblical.
This is their biggest point.
Well, so what does this all mean? What's the connection the source makes between a French parade and Genesis chapter 6?
They draw a straight line back to Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4. The events right before the worldwide flood. This is where the text describes the sons of God having children with human women.
And their interpretation of sons of God, this is a key interpretive jump.
It is. In their view, supported by other texts like in Job, sons of God are not human rulers. They are divine or spiritual beings, fallen angels.
So the violation was a crossing of species, a corrupt blending.
A blending that was strictly forbidden, yes. And the result of that blending was the Nephilim.
Which the source characterizes as, what, giants?
Giants or hybrids. Literally a polluted version of God's creation. The source stresses that this act of hybridization, this tainting of the divine blueprint, was so egregious.
It was the trigger for the flood.
Primary trigger, yes.
Yeah.
The entire narrative for them hinges on this idea. Corrupted creation leads to destruction.
And they argue this symbolism is consistent throughout the entire Bible, isn't it?
It is. They point to prophecies in Daniel and Revelation with those hybrid beasts, part lion, part bear, part leopard.
Which always symbolize corruption or darkness-influenced empires.
Right, and they contrast this with how pagan nations like Egypt often worshipped these human-animal combinations.
What's truly fascinating here is how they connect all these ancient, complex threads back to this modern event.
They conclude that by parading these exact types of hybrid entities, the demoness Lilith, the Minotaur, this government event is tapping directly into the same themes the Bible uses to portray rebellion and corruption.
It's not just art, it's an ancient sign, just modernized.
And that leads directly to their prophetic conclusion. They argue that the latter days, as described in Scripture, would be like the days of Noah.
And because this imagery is now being displayed and normalized?
They see a spiritual cycle coming full circle. The very imagery that preceded the flood is now being paraded in public in our time. And they interpret that as a sign of prophecy being fulfilled.
That is a substantive and, a meticulously built case from the source material. The author's message for you, the listener, seems pretty clear. The boldness of this event is a sign that the enemy is getting more bold.
And that the world is actively normalizing this stuff right in front of us. They frame this whole discussion as a demonstration of an ongoing spiritual battle.
And it culminates in a call for Christians to cultivate discernment.
Yes, to recognize the specific language and imagery being used in public life, even when it's presented as just, entertainment or art.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it raises an important question for you to consider. What are the broader cultural implications when these ancient spiritually charged symbols,
The inverted pentagram, the Minotaur, Lilith,
right, when they're deployed in modern, publicly funded spectacles reaching millions of people, regardless of whether the audience even understands their original meaning?
the question really is about normalization, isn't it? Even if the modern message is claimed to be divorced from the original ritualistic intent, the sheer scale and acceptance, it demands scrutiny.
It really does.
It gives us a profound question to mull over. How much latent spiritual messaging are we consuming when powerful, ancient symbols become just commonplace public display? It makes you wonder how symbolism shapes culture, even without our conscious understanding.